Welcome to the closing session of the WTO's Agri-Food Business Day. Welcome to our panelists. Welcome to our viewers. Agri-Food Business Day was a two-day event, the first of its kind, in which the WTO sounded out the business community and farm leaders on how well the multilateral trading system contributes to global food security. The goal was also to see whether the trading system has been responsive to business needs. The event was divided into 5 roundtables on the following topics: resilient global food and agricultural value chains, food standards for better functioning global value chains, trade facilitation, digitalization, and e-commerce, the environmental sustainability of global value chains, and finally, industry views on the rules-based multilateral trading system. And all of these roundtables have been recorded and they sit on the WTO Agri-Food Business Day website for future viewership. And so does the opening session of this event, and so will this closing session. In each of these sessions, CEOs of important agri-food businesses, industry and farm leaders, as well as WTO ambassadors, very distinguished ambassadors and agricultural attachés, engaged in active discussions on some of the most topical issues facing agricultural trade. They also received and responded to hundreds of questions from viewers from all over the globe. It was really impressive to see just how questions arrived from all corners of the globe. My name is Doa Abdelmoutal. I'm Senior Counselor in the WTO Agriculture and Commodities Division, and I am pleased that I'll be moderating this closing session as well. I'll be putting 2 rounds of questions to this very distinguished panel, after which I'll be opening the floor to questions from you, the viewers. Viewers can send questions to dialogues@WTO.org. So please let me, without further ado, introduce this very distinguished closing panel to you. Annabel Gonzalez, Deputy Director General of WTO. Welcome, Annabel. Michael Keller, Secretary General of the International Seed Federation, and now also Chair of the International Agri-Food Network. Hello, Michael. Ambassador Maria Pagan, Permanent Representative of the US to the WTO. Hello. Ariana Giuliodori, Secretary General of the World Farmers Organization. Hello, Ariana. And Ambassador Ahmed Ihed Gemeleddin, Permanent Representative of Egypt to the WTO. Hello, Ambassador. Prior to initiating the first round of questions, I would like to hand over the floor to Annabel Gonzalez for a few observations on this 2-day event. Annabel, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Doa, and hello to everyone. I would like to start by saying that I think this has truly been an extraordinary event, and kudos to you, Doa, for putting it together. I found particularly fascinating the near unanimity, I would say, of agri-food businesses and farmers, big and small, on the fact that international trade is critical to global food security. I participated in the opening session and listened attentively to all other sessions and have heard no dissent. In fact, the support for international trade went further, with the Grain and Feed Trade Association, GAFTA, and the International Fertilizer Association, IFA, clearly indicating that no country can go it alone to ensure its food security in today's world. IFA added that where phosphorus, nitrogen, or other minerals find themselves in the ground is based on no more than an accident of geography, with the fertilizer industry, by definition, now being one of the most globalized industries in the world. The food and fertilizer crisis was front and center of all roundtables, with participants expressing serious concerns about the current situation and their hope that trade policy would be part of the solution and not part of the problem. The underlying message of all sessions, I thought, was that this is a time for the international community to join hands rather than drift apart. Countries need to be sharing food and fertilizer in the multiple global agricultural value chains that have formed across the globe. I was particularly struck by Gerald Massila's words that to impose an export restriction on fertilizer in one end of the globe would be to seal the fate of large numbers of people on the opposite end. And I quote, to sign their death warrant, he said. He is, of course, the executive director of the East African Grains Council. Agri-Food Business Day also sent a strong message on the themes of food standards and non-tariff barriers to trade. Standards need to be science-based and anchored in international norms. Countries cannot go it alone on standards either. To do so would be to impose an unnecessary cost on trade and ultimately on the poorest countries. The same went for the themes of digitalization, e-commerce, and trade facilitation addressed in these 2 days. Industry and farm leaders want us to push actively in this direction, which they see as the future. We heard the Global Pulse Confederation tell us that digitalization is transforming the logistics of trade, the turnaround time for vessels and containers, and dramatically lowering shipping costs. But we also heard the Global Alliance for Trade Facilitation tell us that the incomplete application of the agreement is literally, and I quote, money left on the table. The WTO must move faster in all of these areas, which will ultimately define the future of food and agricultural trade. In fact, Roundtable 3, in Roundtable 3, the Nigerian agricultural attaché who was moderating the session chuckled as a viewer asked how soon we thought that 3D printed biscuits and bread would wipe traditional foods off the market. The viewer is clearly ahead of us here in the WTO. Now, particularly intriguing, was the discussion around environmental sustainability at this event. While some agribusiness warned against using sustainability to raise barriers to trade, we heard this loud and clear, for example, from the Brazilian Agribusiness Association. Others argued that agricultural trade and sustainability were no longer themes that the world could afford to address separately. The Brazilian Business Council for Sustainable Development indicated that because agricultural value chains were so globalized, no producer could claim to be operating sustainably until the totality of the global value chain was greened. International trade was making it essential to take the sustainability discussion to global scale. There was discussion of the need to reform trade-distorting agricultural subsidies and to repurpose them, with companies as large as Nestle telling us that they are unable to green their supply chain with agricultural subsidies pushing in the wrong direction. The Australian ambassador expressed this very well when he said that while he would give the WTO a take on the oceans, given its recent success with the WTO fishery subsidies negotiations, he would not be able to give it such a take on land. In other words, the WTO has some unfinished business before it. The developing world was also very vocal on sustainability. I was struck by the ambassador of Cameroon's plea that standards for deforestation should not come at the expense of food security. The need to balance food and environmental security was also echoed by businesses like the Global Dairy Platform. Clearly, sustainability is a delicate issue on which a careful balance will need to be struck at the WTO negotiating table. In the end, at this event, industry and farm leaders have sent the WTO community a message that is loud and clear. They want more, not less WTO. And I firmly believe that we in the WTO must now take the time to reflect on this event and to deliver. Michael, you are now chair of the International Agri-Food Network. Once again, thank you very much for helping make this event possible. My team tells me that it would not have happened without IAFN. Thank you very much, and back to you, Doa.
Thank you very much, Annabelle. And with these opening remarks, I'd now like to move with the first round of questions. Ambassador Gemeleddin, I'd like to start with you for some scene setting on a very important topic, sustainability. COP27 has just recently concluded. In it, food security played a central role. What can you tell us about the outcome of the COP on food and agriculture?
Thank you very much, Dua, for inviting me with all these very good participants today in this important event, and which I am sure will enrich the discussion on agriculture and sustainability. At the outset, the world's agricultural sector is increasingly vulnerable to climate change. The evidence on the impact of climate change on food security is growing worldwide, and more prominently in developing countries. Rising temperatures, heat waves, droughts, floods, changes in rainfall patterns, and extreme weather events, they all affect agriculture more than any other sector. Against this background, and food security pillar, thought to have been at risk of dropping off the climate talks agenda, were given a stronger mandate and was prioritized in COP27 agenda in Sharm el-Sheikh. Let me refer first to the Food Security Roundtable, attended by some of the world leaders and heads of international organizations, including our dear Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, our Director General, where the risks of hunger and malnutrition among the most vulnerable groups exacerbated by climate change were stressed. It was agreed that the agricultural sector has a unique position, being on one hand among the most vulnerable to climate change, and on the other a major contributor to greenhouse gas emissions and the main driver of deforestation. Also, it was recognized that transformation of the food systems is a cornerstone in combating climate change, and that the implementation of climate-resilient agriculture and food systems requires political will, international cooperation, exchange of knowledge and best practices, as well as financial resources to support producers and value chain actors across the world. Second, we had the thematic day on adaptation and agriculture in COP27, and it focused on how the world will feed 8 billion people. Throughout the day, a series of sessions and initiatives we shed light on them, on pathways forward on adaptation and climate resilient agriculture. And Egypt COP27 presidency launched 4 initiatives to address the transformation of agri-food systems, the integration of climate responses to peace and security, the improvement of the quality of life of the most vulnerable in Africa by 2030, and delivery of healthy diets, respectively. For the sake of time, I will focus on the Food and Agriculture for Sustainable Transformation Initiative, FAST, that was launched in partnership with the FAO. FAST is designed as a catalyst, building on ongoing global and regional initiatives and coalitions to drive effective climate action while avoiding duplication. FAST is a multi-stakeholder program that aims not only to step up finance to transform agriculture, but also to adaptation efforts and pursue the Paris Agreement's 1.5 degree global warming limit, while supporting economic and food security. 40 countries and stakeholders announced their support for the FAST initiative, insofar including foundations, banks, private sector, and NGOs. Furthermore, the third thing is that COP adopted a decision on climate action on agriculture and food security. It builds upon or extends the Coronivia Joint Work Program on agriculture adopted in COP23 in Bonn in 2017, bearing in mind that at COP26 in Glasgow, countries could not reach consensus on what the roadmap for the future of Coronivia should look like. The fourth is the Sharm el-Sheikh joint work to promote holistic approaches to addressing climate impacts both on and from agriculture on food security. And it will be a key hub for coordinating discussions and political decisions on these matters. It entails a number of specific activities related to promoting synergies between actors within and outside the UN system and the UN climate change process, and providing support and technical advice to countries and financing entities on climate action on agriculture and food security. In this regard, countries agreed to establish an online portal, Sharm el-Sheikh online portal, for sharing information on projects, initiatives, and policies for increasing opportunities to implement these actions. Finally, and importantly as well, in partnership with Egypt's COP27 presidency, the UN Climate Change High-Level Champions launched the Sharm el-Sheikh Adaptation Agenda, which is a comprehensive shared agenda to rally global action around 30 adaptation outcomes that are needed to address the adaptation gap and achieve a resilient world by 2030. It advocates for action around 4 Sharm el-Sheikh adaptation outcomes for food and agriculture. One is the climate resilient sustainable agriculture increases yield by 17% and reduces farm level greenhouse gas emissions by 21% without expansion of the agricultural frontier. And B, to halve the share of food production lost and per capita food waste relative to 2019. And C, a healthy alternative proteins capture 15% of the global meat and seafood market. And finally, the global consumption of fruits, vegetables, seeds, nuts, and legumes increases 1.5 times by 2030. So this is, if you allow me, some setting the tone with what happened in Sharm el-Sheikh. Thank you very much. Back to you, Dua.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. And indeed, I think you've given us a very comprehensive overview of what happened at the COP on food and ag. And in the opening session of Agri-Food Business Day, we had Agnes Kalibata with us, who last year was the special envoy for the UN Food Systems Summit. And it was interesting to hear her say that she counted as one of the successes of the summit the weight that food and agriculture was given as a topic at COP27 this year. So these are certainly some important achievements. Ariana, I'd like to turn to you. Going forward, the role of trade in ensuring global food security will only rise. With the climate crisis, we will depend on each other more than ever before to ensure our collective food security. What message would farmers like to send to the multilateral trading system?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dua, for this invitation, for the opportunity to join this honorable panel with amazing speakers. I'm particularly grateful that the farmers have the chance to join today. Thanks for this question. Let me just start with a very short introduction to the World Farmers Organization. We represent today 78 national farmers organization and organizations of agricultural cooperatives from all continents, being therefore the biggest independent global farmers' voice. And there's no doubt that there's a huge diversity in our membership. We do represent all kinds of farming systems, all farming sizes, all geographies. But there's something which is evident to all, that when it comes to international trade, when it comes to create a level playing field for international trade to happen, all farmers agree and are able to overcome differences and focus on what unites them. It's not a chance, actually, that during our last General Assembly in June 2022, our members unanimously approved a statement that was then presented to the 12th ministerial session of the WTO, where farmers clearly requested governments to pursue the reinforcement of the global agricultural trading system so that, let me quote, farmers can operate in a fair, transparent, and predictable trading environment. So back to your question, so what do the farmers need and what is the message of the farmers? Farmers need exactly this, a fair, transparent, and predictable trading system, because if we are asking the farmers to deliver to immense challenges, and we heard from His Excellencies from Egypt to what extent farmers have a role to play in fighting against climate change, for instance, while guaranteeing that we can feed the world. I could also add the role of farmers in ensuring biodiversity, or the role of farmers in keep on having thriving social communities in rural areas, or again, the many ecosystem services they are delivering. Well, if we need this to happen, and if we want them to be resilient in food systems around the world, we really need to support them. We really need to make it easier for the farmers to have access to credit, to have access to input, as for instance, fertilizers, and we need to give them the political stability that they need at country and global level. It's clear that in the world we're living in today, with conflicts ravaging the peace across the planet, and with the risk of food crisis and the higher and higher costs that farmers are facing, definitely there is a long way to go. But there's a final message that I would love to add to our conversation today. The farmers are not simply asking for support. The farmers of the world are coming to the table saying a clear message that is, let's do it together. Let's work hand in hand, all of the stakeholders in the food system, all with the government, with science, with civil society, to bring options to the table in a real spirit of partnership that is perfectly coherent with the Agenda 2030 goal SDG number 17, and that will help us deliver. Thank you very much.
Arianna, thank you very much for this very passionate statement. And indeed, the WTO needs to support farmers through a robust multilateral trading system, clear rules, absolutely. And we certainly do see farmers as partners in this discussion. Michael, let me come to you. No seeds, no food. With the seed sector being highly globalized, what should the priorities of the multilateral trading system be to support the seed sector going forward?
Yeah, thanks. Though always difficult to speak after Arianna, but I would like to thank also the Deputy Director General Annabelle and Dora really for offering us the chance as the industry in the agricultural food chain to have this open discussion with you. I think this is also where we would like here, it's not about talking, it's really about also walking together in a joint future, because Annabelle, it's clear, I will not say here we don't need multilateralism. It's clear, you heard it throughout the 2 days. The private sector is fully engaged in this idea of multilateralism. And the private sector is also totally committed. And I think this is important. We felt it since 2-3 years. More and more, we do not need to speak about all the challenges we are facing. We know the challenges. Now is action time. And the action time, you know, that's business. For us, action time is every day. And therefore, for us, it is here to again show our commitment to end global poverty and to end food security. The International Agri-Food Network, which is representing 18 international organizations acting from inputs to the output at international level, representing hundreds of thousands of SMEs, but also multinationals, also cooperatives, is fully engaged in this direction. And we know in sustainability, we need to have discussions, but the discussions need to happen in a multilateral level. I would like also to thank Excellency from Egypt about all the initiatives taken at COP27, because now agriculture and food is part of the discussion, but it's not seen only as a problem. It's really seen also as a solution provider. Now, Doa, clearly, I'm here also to speak about seed, and let me be very frank, it's about empowering farmers. It's about, when we speak about seed, when we speak about food production, it's about how are we able in our diversity to empower the farmers. Because, and here we come also to international trade, because farmers, and Ariana knows it quite better than us, and we are never speaking the names of farmers, but the farmers' needs varies at national level, at local level, and even at the farm level. That means the needs are very different. That means the sources also, the farmers' needs, seed supply, need to be diverse. And therefore, it's the whole question about access. Access also to improved varieties, access to innovation, because, and that's a key word, and I hope it was mentioned very often, nothing will happen without research and development. Nothing will happen if we are not able to use all the innovations we have and we will have in future. And also for these innovations, we need consistent regulatory framework to be able to move it. And when we speak about supply for seeds, also for farmers, multilateralism is more than ever important, because in times of all these challenges, farmers are changing their needs. Farmers are changing from one day to another the varieties they need. That means we need to be able to move the right seed to the right place in the right time, because you know exactly if the seed is not arriving at the right time, we are missing a planting season. And we know what happened currently with the situation of Ukraine. We don't have the right to miss it. And therefore, it is so important in a world where you have 120 countries importing seed. That means there's an interdependency on seed. We spoke a lot about fertilizers, but we need also to take into account there is an interdependency on seeds worldwide. And therefore, our call is clear. We need predictable, we need harmonized, and even more importantly, science-based regulations. Because what is happening to us and what is happening also sometimes to other private actors is, look, phytosanitary measures. From one day to another, a country is blocking because of so-called science-based reason, the movement of seeds. This is something, and we thank therefore also WTO and SPS for all the things done at that level. Therefore, it's so important. We need to keep the borders open, and we need to be more than ever to work together in collaboration in our complementarity. Back to you, Dora.
Very well put, Michael. And indeed, trade in seeds is about access to the latest seeds and therefore access to innovation and state-of-the-art agriculture. So, you know, if there is one industry where trade liberalization is absolutely needed to improve agricultural systems around the world, it's the seed industry. Thank you very much for those enlightening comments. Ambassador Pagan, let me turn to you. Are there any innovations that can be introduced to the WTO rulebook in the area of agriculture to accompany the transition which our food systems need to make? Food systems are being called upon to produce more food, to produce nutritious food, to produce safe food, and to do so sustainably. Over to you, Ambassador.
Thank you. And first of all, thank you for the invitation to participate in this very important conversations. It's really a pleasure, and I will have to sit down and listen to some of the other panels. I haven't been able to focus too much on them yet. Turning to your question, I think we need to recognize that the needs that you described have always been there. producing more food, more nutritious food, safe food, and ensuring that we can keep feeding the world into the future has always been there. Today, there is more energy and interest in this space due to increasing vulnerabilities felt globally over the past 3 years. Some food insecurity is rooted in conflict, sadly, and some due to catastrophes like earthquakes, floods, droughts, etc. And we need to address how to get food to people in these vulnerable situations and during times of crisis. Whether in crisis or stability, agricultural trade that is free and open, bolstered by the existing WTO rules, is essential to providing food security for all, while supporting the livelihoods of the roughly 1 billion people worldwide working in agriculture. And I like the message from Ariana: fair, transparent, predictable trading system. Completely agree. That is the key that is always there, whether in normal times or in times of crisis. The question for us is how can the WTO serve as an enabler for the system to continue working? Importantly, agricultural production and trade must be conducted in a sustainable way for long-term resilience of our food systems. Throughout history, farmers and innovators have developed and implemented new techniques and technologies to improve the efficiency of agricultural production. Again, technology, innovation, obviously another key issue. Today, more and more countries are investing in ways to increase crop yields while reducing environmental impacts, including through the use of digital technologies. WTO members are seeking to promote new innovations, including those that promote sustainable agricultural productivity growth and those that lower greenhouse gas emissions and increase carbon sequestration. Here, the WTO can play a role by incentivizing investments in such innovations, including by ensuring that markets are open to products produced with such technologies and innovative methods. In order to foster innovation, it'll be critical that the first to innovate in certain spheres will not attempt to mandate that their solution be the only solution as a condition for trade. I think, again, I think it was Michael maybe that spoke about different conditions exist, in different countries and even, in the same country within different farming regions. So, innovation is great, but, we have to be open to a variety of innovations. That flexibility would be sure to impede global efforts. Such inflexibility, would be sure to impede global efforts to improve sustainability while ensuring food security. There is no one-size-fits-all solution, and we must be mindful of the prevailing conditions in countries where food is being produced. Again, the point about different circumstances. So we believe that innovative and creative solutions are necessary for food systems to keep pace with evolving needs and challenges in order to improve the health of the planet and the well-being of current and future generations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, and thank you for putting the emphasis on innovation. Indeed, innovation is really the name of the game right now, given the size of the challenges that the world faces. We absolutely have to innovate, being mindful of the fact that we will require a suite of solutions and not just one solution, given the diversity of agricultural systems around the globe. Very well put. Annabelle, I'd like to turn to you. Relative to other areas of the WTO rulebook, what makes agriculture so hard? Is agriculture the toughest nut that the WTO must crack?
So the short answer is yes. I think, it may surprise viewers to know that as the WTO settles, complex disputes that have to do with some of the world's most sophisticated industrial products, say like the Boeing Airbus disputes, or disputes that have to do with state-of-the-art services like sports streaming services, there will always be a dispute before the WTO that has to do with rice, with wheat, or bananas. While the share of world agricultural trade in total merchandise trade has been falling steadily over the years, the volume of world agricultural exports has nevertheless risen substantially in the past few decades. Agriculture continues to be a very important sector of world trade, and accounts for about 8.5% of world exports. But to understand why trade negotiations in this sector are among the most complicated, you must go down, I think, to the national level. Agriculture in many WTO members account for the bulk of GDP and employment. Suffice it to look at Africa, where agriculture accounts for over 30% of GDP in Ethiopia, 40% of GDP in Chad, and 60% of GDP in Sierra Leone, when forestry and fisheries are taken into account. Now in Malawi, it employs up to 80% of the active workforce, and in Burundi, 90%. But agriculture is no less important in the rest of the world, where it represents the health of our soils and the quality of our landscapes and rural environments, the quality of our food and nutrition supply, and vital income for farmers. Food sits at the crossroads of our cultural, religious, and many other beliefs, so it's also an extremely emotional topic sometimes. So for all of these reasons, this is a sector where trade barriers remain rampant. Some take the form of classic tariffs and subsidies, measures clearly intended to promote domestic over imported products, while others take the more complex form of safety and quality standards. Luckily, we in the WTO are equipped to deal with different types of barriers and have legal instruments that are specific to each barrier, like the Agreement on Agriculture, the Agreement on Sanitary and Phytosanitary Measures, and the Agreement on Technical Barriers to Trade. But Doha, make no mistake, while agriculture is amongst the toughest nut to crack in the WTO has cracked it in the past through legal instruments that have remained with us and that have remained effective to this day. And the WTO will crack this tough nut again. Just take the food security decisions adopted at the WTO's 12th Ministerial Conference. I hope that WTO members will continue to take the agricultural negotiations further. The trading system plays a vital role in moving food from the parts of the world that are in surplus to the parts that are in deficit. So we must make sure that we have the best agricultural trading system we can possibly have.
Thank you very much, Annabelle. And indeed, it's a call to WTO members to continue to solidify the system and to continue to take it further. Let me now move to the second round of questions. Ambassador Gemeluddin, let me come back to you. Net food importing developing countries in the WTO and least developed countries have been asking for special attention to be paid to their needs, in particular in light of the ongoing food and fertilizer crisis. Has the WTO been responsive, in your opinion? And what of the IMF's newly opened food shock window?
Yes, indeed. In June 2022, before the WTO's 12th Ministerial Conference, Egypt submitted a draft decision on food insecurity to be adopted by the ministers of the MC12 on behalf of the African group, the Arab group, and the LDC group, and the NFIDCs. This proposal aimed at providing short, medium, and long-term solutions to achieve food security in LDCs and NFIDCs through enhancing policy space, local production, providing necessary financial support, building resilience, and ensuring access to food supply. So, through the proposal, we called for making Marrakesh decision of April 1994 more effective and operational by mandating the General Council of the WTO to agree to an international compensatory financing mechanism like FAO Food Import Financing Facility for food imports by NFIDCs and LDCs in order to maintain their normal levels of imports in the face of price shocks. There were some difficulties reaching consensus during MC12 negotiations on some pillars, including the financial tool, the policy space for NFIDCs and LDCs under Article 6.2 of the Agreement on Agriculture, Also, we did not reach consensus on raising the de minimis limits for NFIDCs and LDCs under Article 6.4b of the Agreement of Agriculture, even if the conditions still had to be agreed. Nevertheless, we succeeded in MC12 in including some elements of our proposal in the MC12 Ministerial Declaration on the emergency response to food insecurity. I refer here to paragraph 8 of the declaration, which affirms the commitment of the membership to have a dedicated work program to examine how the Marrakesh decision could be made more effective and operational pursuant to the Agreement on Agriculture. Since then, we negotiated and participated with other members on a work program that will consider the needs of LDCs and NFIDCs to increase their resilience in responding to acute food instability. And finally, the WTO members have agreed to establish a work program in the Committee on Agriculture to address food security concerns, which marks an important step in putting into effect the MC12 Ministerial Declaration on the emergency response to food insecurity. With regards to the new window you are referring to, the food shock window, which was agreed by the IMF board on the 30th of September, this window provides increased access to emergency financing instruments for countries that have urgent balance of payment needs associated with the global food shocks, and where a multi-year reform program is not immediately feasible, which is not the case in the case, for example, of a country like Egypt, my own, which is in progress, is about to finalize an agreement, a staff-level agreement with the IMF on comprehensive economic policies and reforms to be supported by a 46-month extended fund facility. So in a nutshell, it is very difficult for some countries that are implementing a reform program under one of the IMF disbursement facility, or even those countries which are recently benefited from other emergency instruments like the Rapid Credit Fund, to benefit from the new window as an emergency financing tool. But we still have to pursue on how to make such instruments available and in the right time to help countries who are facing very dire situation to address these issues before it becomes a systemic problem at the global level. So back to you, Doha. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this. So clearly the WTO is paying some attention to the needs of developing and net food importing and least developed net food importing countries with this dedicated work program that's now underway. So thank you very much for pointing that out. But of course, there's still a long road ahead, as you've also indicated. Ambassador Payan, let me come back to you. Despite the enormous importance of agricultural trade to the global economy and to our collective food security, some would say that agricultural negotiations in the WTO have stalled. Why is that, and can the situation be redressed in your view? Can you walk us through some of the politics of these negotiations? A difficult question.
Easy, right? Well, precisely because agriculture is such an important sector to each one of us, and some of the numbers that Annabelle read out, bear evidence to that. The conversation is necessarily politically difficult, because it is such an important sector. In 2015, ministers noted that there was no longer consensus regarding the Doha mandate. 7 years later, we're still having the same conversations, and maybe it is time to come to grips with this reality. Now, rather than focusing on whether this is a failure, we should view it as an opportunity, as an important turning point for us to take a new path. We need to reframe the agriculture negotiations to reflect current challenges with respect to agricultural trade, such as those related to climate change, sustainability, and food security, some of the topics that have been discussed in this last 2 days and over time. So this is an inspiring time because there is such scope for creativity in finding new approaches to tackle these real-world challenges. But first, we need a clear and common understanding across the WTO membership of the current state of agricultural trade in the context of those challenges. I think one reason the agricultural negotiations have faced such difficulty is the lack of a common understanding of those challenges. Without this common understanding, it's a little bit hard to find solutions. A related difficulty is the lack of up-to-date and accurate data, which is in part a result of the members not fulfilling their notification commitments, and this is something the United States is fairly passionate about. This data is needed on a timely basis in order to understand members' current policies and how they are impacting global agricultural markets. Once we have current objective data and information, we must actually then commit to using it, rather than continuing to have the same conversation that sometimes reflects fairly outdated positions. Yes, we are living in a moment of crisis, and there is urgency to find solutions, particularly as Russia's illegal war against Ukraine continues to exacerbate global food security tensions. However, the WTO must take a long-term, sustainable approach in support of agricultural production and trade. Ministers recognize this by adopting the Ministerial Declaration on the Emergency Response to Food Insecurity at the recent ministerial conference, which committed members to take concrete steps to facilitate trade and improve long-term resilience of global markets for food and agriculture, including specifically, as has already been mentioned, for LDCs and NFIDC members. And I am, quite happy that we have been able to agree on the terms of reference, for the work program to start being developed. It is worth reflecting on how the existing basic rules keep markets open to the benefit of WTO members, again, a point that was made earlier, while also considering where there is room for improvement, again, recognizing that one-size-fits-all solutions without attention to the real-world circumstances, such as if one of us may not be the answer. The United States is committed to being a partner in this effort and to the success of the WTO in reframing agriculture negotiations for the challenges of today. I want to stress that we are ready to contribute to agricultural reform, including on domestic support and market access. Pre-MC12 discussions were simply not yielding the pathway to achieving that by MC12, but again, we are committed to continuing trying to find a way forward. We need to take the time to reflect and to do the right thing. And we owe it to our farmers as we rely on them to meet the challenges of feeding the world. So again, we have our commitment and hopefully we can find a way forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. So a couple of messages there. The negotiation in some ways needs to be reframed. It needs to come closer to real world concerns and to the issues of today. But to do so, there's a need for a common understanding of what the challenges are, what are those concerns and what are those challenges. And there's also a need for data, better data, and for that conversation to be anchored in better information. So some very useful messages there. Thank you. Michael, let me come back to you. As chair of the International Agri-Food Network, so I'm now asking you to wear a different hat. And my first question to you, I was asking you about seeds. But as chair of the International Agri-Food Network, what message would you send to the world in this closing session on the importance of not turning inwards as a result of recent crises and protecting global food and agricultural value chains?
Yeah, thanks, Dora. And perhaps that's also the excuse why I have not a background, because I would need to switch my background then from IFN to International Seed Federation. I apologize for this one. No, very serious. I think, and I would like to take the words of Annabelle, who reminded us in one of the sessions before, the accidents of geography. These accidents of geography, we cannot solve them. We need to accept them. We need to work with them. Give me the example. You will not start in, I will not name any country, from one day to another, cereal production or any other production or having dairy somewhere. You cannot. It's an accident of geography. At the same time, we know also climate change will impact us more and more. We know we need to produce more with less. We know we have to increase agricultural food production by 50%. That means we have to take into account also the reality of just the geographics. That's enough yet to say there is no time and perhaps there is no justification today to turn inwards. We can only, I think, address all the points mentioned also by Ambassador Pagan before. We can only address these topics together in a holistic way, in accepting the complementarity of each of us. And again, the private sector is clearly here, and you saw it and you heard it, to play a role. We spoke about innovation. Data is an absolutely critical topic for the private sector. We are always pushing to increase the work also on data, because we are looking for science-based solutions that needs also to be based on data. Therefore, it's so critical. And again, WTO, we see you have to play and you should play a role in these discussions about the needed multilateralism. And therefore, for me and from the IFN, there's clearly a call today to promote the renewed commitment of the members of WTO to start the discussions, to lowering barriers, to expand the positive role of rules based on international trading system. We need these rules. We need this consistency. And we are looking also that all countries are participating. All of them should be part, because it is a global issue. There is a need for commitment of principles of non-discrimination, enforceability, transparency, reciprocity, absolutely essential. We saw it also during COVID, how important it was that we could continue to move food and agricultural input, because also of the recognition of reciprocally the rules in place in different countries. We need this, and all countries need to participate, because if you're not in these countries, we are locking more and more the least developed countries. And the focus needs also to be on these least developed countries. We know also that trade is essential in ensuring commodity and food that efficiently moving also in an affordable way. It means these are knock-on effects also. And I think and you heard about also investments. We need more investments in agriculture. But to do more investments, it's also so important that we have this consistency and this clear rule books, because the private sector, yes, is ready. And again, perhaps I can take again my seed sector hat. Yes, the private sector is ready to go also in countries perhaps where today you don't have even a private sector. But what we need, it's also clear, consistent rule book concerning and enabling business environment. And this is where we see also the role of WTO. Again, we need multilateralism. We need a discussion on agriculture and food. It's important that it's again on the table also on WTO. It's on the table in different other bodies, but trade is essential. Back to you, Dora.
Thank you, Michael. Indeed, I think you put it very well. We need to accept the accidents of geography. We need to accept them because geography is what it is, and where some natural resources lie is something that we can't necessarily change, and the world does need to collaborate. So thank you very much for that. Ariana, let me come back to you. And my next question to you is on innovation, an issue that has just been stressed by the US ambassador. Now, the future of agriculture clearly lies in innovation, in more innovative ways to grow our food and to enhance their nutritional content, as well as new and better ways to fertilize our land, and much more. What can the WTO and what must the WTO rulebook do to accompany these innovations, which farmers clearly need?
Thank you very much, Doa. Indeed, innovation is at the heart of the farmers' activities. And let me say, it truly represents the pathways to sustainability and to the future of sustainable production. Bearing in mind, and I think it's always appropriate to remind all of us that sustainability includes 3 different dimensions, for sure, the environmental, the social one, and the economic one, because farming, let's remind all of us, farming is a business, and we must make sure that it's viable. So innovation is key. But innovation, according to the way farmers look at it, and I'm particularly happy to share with you that the World Farmers Organization recently embraced unanimously also policy on innovation. Farmers see innovation as a process that entails much more than simply technology. That's the easiest part, but innovation is a process that stems from business models to the way we do develop policies, to the way we do interact as farmers with other stakeholders, and for sure also the way we do farm on the ground. But there's one point where farmers are all in agreement. Innovation must be inclusive. So we must make efforts to make innovation accessible and affordable to all farmers. We heard about how important it is to provide pathways to the least developed and the developing countries. So global North and global South farmers share this need to make innovation affordable, and innovation knowledge sharing models more close to the farmers' needs. That's why we speak about a farmer-driven innovation, where farmers are considered innovators by nature and by necessity. They have always been innovating. And even when we speak about traditional knowledge, which we value so deeply, there are ways to innovate to make sure that they can still deliver value looking ahead in the future. But I would like to point out one specific point of innovation this afternoon, also considering the amazing words I heard from the previous speakers. Innovation in the way we do work on the definition of the rules. And Doa, you've been asking about also the WTO rulebook. Well, we live in a world that tends to polarize, that tends to create dichotomies. It's a black and white world that farmers don't like. Farmers, on the opposite, do need the full range of diversity to be considered as an option, as feasible. We need to provide the complementarity of solutions. We need to bring the widest possible toolbox of solutions to the attention of the farmers. And all of them must be solidly science-based, or proved by science, assessed by science. For instance, let me give you an example. We need both thriving local food systems and an international trade that is running smoothly, and both should be fair and delivering value to producers. So, to your point on what should the WTO rulebook include so that farmers could be up to the innovation challenge, well, I heard what Ambassador Pan said about reframing the agricultural negotiations, reframing the rules. So probably what we need is to innovate also there. So shifting the angle, probably moving away from commodities and supply chain and refocusing on the people that are producing food on the ground. What happens if we put the farmers at the heart of redesigning this role? So let me be provocative maybe, but why don't we ask the farmers what they would love to see in the WTO rulebook? Right now, for instance, at the World Farmers Organizations, our members are gathering into a task force to review the policy on international trade that the farmers adopted. So they are collecting data directly from the ground, from those who have their fingers in the soil every day, to identify what are the innovations needed, what are the right pathways to ensure that we can have this complementarity and we can have a smooth and fair international trade system. So what if we break down the silos, we break down these barriers, we embrace the spirit of partnership, and we have farmers and WTO members discussing and maybe highlighting in an authentic dialogue what might be the way forward, because it's clear that's probably the hardest nut to crack, as you said, but that's the nut that we need to tackle. And there might be new pathways where global challenges and local needs, national needs, can be part of the same answer. And the farmers are ready to tackle this challenge. And we will be delighted to do it together. Thank you very much, and over.
Thank you very much, Ariana. Three messages stand out for me from your intervention. One, farmer-driven innovation. Two, the widest possible toolbox for farmers. And three, farmers at the negotiating table. So I think these are very important takeaways from your intervention, and I'm sure everyone here is reflecting, and viewers are also reflecting on these proposals. Annabelle, let me come back to you. This is the end of the second round of questions, and so what message would you like to send to WTO agriculture negotiators at the end of this two-day event? If you had a message, what would it be?
Thank you very much, Doa. This has been an extremely rich event, so it is difficult to focus on one single message. But if I had to point out one thing, I would say that food is no longer made in one country, but it is rather assembled in the world. In fact, the FAO tells us that 1/3 of all agriculture and food exports cross international borders at least twice as the global food assembly process takes shape. And take a very simple product like a bar of chocolate. And I think that probably no other product can help us understand just how globalized our food systems are, like a chocolate bar. And maybe many people don't realize the number of countries involved in the production of a bar of chocolate. But we have West African countries, particularly Ivory Coast and Ghana, that are the leading producers of cocoa today, accounting for some 60% of our world cocoa supply. The milk that goes into our chocolates will come from many different locations. Among the world's top milk exporting countries are New Zealand, Germany, the Netherlands, and the United States. In a bar chocolate, we also find sugar, and we find various additives and flavorings, which are themselves sourced from across the world. Among the world's top sugar exporting countries are Brazil, Thailand, India, France, and Guatemala. And I will spare you the details on the hazelnuts and the raisins or the peanuts that might come yet from another set of countries. Not to mention, of course, that when the bar of chocolate is finally assembled, and I stress this word assembled, it then needs packaging, marketing, transportation, and retail sale. So all of these goods and services will also come from different locations. So the reality is that a bar of chocolate is not made in any particular country. It is made in the world. And that does not stop with chocolate. That now applies to almost all of our processed food. So my message to negotiators at the end of these 2 days is a plea that they keep global food and agricultural value chains at the center of their thinking. We are no longer in a world where restricting the import of ingredient X or Y will anyway benefit a country. Rather, these restrictions hurt all domestic producers that form part of the global assembly line. We are in a world where we need to nurture and promote our interdependence, since this interdependence has led to products that we love, like chocolate, but has almost also enormously enriched the human diet and boosted global food security. So if trade barriers made little sense several decades ago, they make no sense at all today. In particular, not in a sector like food. Thank you, Doa.
Thank you very much, Annabelle. Indeed, our food is assembled around the world, and I suddenly have a massive chocolate craving after your intervention. So we have a lot of questions from viewers. The first question comes to us from an FAO staff member in Rome, and he is directing that question to many of you, actually. And the question is as follows. The International Agri-Food Network and the private sector mechanism plays a role in the Committee on World Food Security in Rome. And the viewer is asking, isn't it strange that the private sector has a place in the Committee on World Food Security and a formal mechanism for interaction, but in the WTO, in the House of Trade, the business community is not officially in and is not officially at the table or officially consulted. So I'd like to hear from Annabelle, the two ambassadors, as well as Michael on this. Annabelle, let me start with you.
Thank you very much, Doa. I do think that this is a very important question because the role of the private sector and other stakeholders in food, as we have been discussing these 2 days, is absolutely critical. Now, the participation of the private sector, I think, can take place at several levels, including at the national level, the regional level, and certainly at the multilateral level. We have several fora at the WTO where we invite the participation of the private sector. That includes large fora like the WTO Public Forum, for example, or this event that we are having today, but also in some committees. Private sector organizations or representatives from the private sector are also invited to speak. I know that there are thoughts about thinking about expanding the participation of the private sector in some of the deliberations. And I think this is an important discussion that members should consider having, WTO members should consider to have, because again, private sector can, in my view, the most important contribution the private sector can make is it can help us ground our negotiations in reality.
Thank you, Annabelle. Ambassador Gemelidine, would you like to comment on this? And then Ambassador Pagan.
My contribution here is the importance of getting all the stakeholders on the table, and to stop the silo effect that sometimes we all suffer from. So the more the different actors are present on the table and express their positions, and we collectively reach an understanding on how to move forward together, the better. Because it ends up sometimes being an unproductive discussion when many important actors on the matter at hand are not present. And the truth of the matter is that we keep seeing more and more is that the governments do not always have the solutions ready-made, and it is important for them to listen and to listen wisely to the various views that may provide you opportunities for moving forward. And this we have seen in all the discussions, and above all in the COP27 that just finished. It's by definition a multitude of stakeholders and people from different backgrounds and different experiences, and the result is better informed when they all have a chance to present their ideas. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ambassador Pagan.
Thank you. This is a wonderful question to start with. In the United States, we do, and I would say it's all sorts of stakeholders, business, NGOs, anybody. We do a very fulsome outreach to stakeholders in developing our domestic process of developing our positions for many things, but including for trade. And we certainly encourage other governments to do the same. I think Annabelle may have mentioned this. This is something that we are looking to see how we can make this. There are interactions with stakeholders at the WTO. We are thinking about, are there other ways that we can, make that better, more regular? So, this is a conversation that is going on as part of the reform conversation, and it's a critical question. Everything that we do at the WTO is, we need to get the feedback of, are we doing the right thing? do you have input for us? There has to be a feedback loop. And while there are ways of doing that, and we have the public forum and various other engagements like that, I think it has to be more mainstreamed into how we do work here. I will say that in particular, and then, so of course I'm talking about stakeholders writ large, but in particular, just recently, my staff here, our delegation, along with other delegations, I'm not going to name any of them exactly, there were a bunch of them. We did do a Voices from the Field event, where we had 2 farmers presenting, and precisely because we do want to hear from people who do put their hands on the ground and get dirty, their views of what things can we do better, and hopefully we can have more of these events, because it is critical, as has been said, to hear from the people who are impacted by what we do here. So thank you, great question.
Thank you very much. And now, of course, Michael, as chair of IAFN, what are your views on the fact that there isn't such a formal mechanism in the WTO?
First, a disclaimer, it was not myself who asked this question. I think that's important to clarify. Let me clarify one thing, because that's very important when we speak about inclusiveness. It's not IFN who is a stakeholder in the Committee on Food Security. It's the whole private sector mechanism, which is broader than the International Agri-Food Network. It means any business, anyone interested coming from the business side could be part of this private sector mechanism in the Committee of Food Security, but IFN is somehow coordinating the whole thing. And here we are, and I would like to go back what also both ambassadors said. The most important thing, it's not the private sector who should sit on the decision-making table. That's not our role. And that's also very important, because sometimes it's giving the impression when you're participating in these debates, then you're directly participating in decision-making. No, it's country-based. That's the same in FAO or in the Committee on Food Security or in other UN bodies. But more importantly, yes, we should avoid to work in silos. And when we say work in silos, I'm urging, because Ariana mentioned also, all those stakeholders who are concerned of questions handled within the WTO should be invited somehow into the workflow. Yeah, private sector, absolutely. And as today, and really thanks for this opportunity today, and I hope we can continue and even foster this kind of dialogues, but perhaps we can structure it even more. But it's not only the private sector, it's the growers, the producers, it's the civil, we know it, the civil society also today has an important role to play, indigenous people. We know this should be inclusive. But through inclusiveness, also building inclusiveness of debates, we can really ground the debate. Because yes, the private sector is acting on the ground. The private sector is investing on the ground. The private sector is bringing innovations on the ground. And yes, we get more and more requests from authorities, national, international authorities, support us. And even now in this emergency situation, support us more. But what we are looking for is we would like to end emergency situations to build sustainable business models. The thing we are looking for is that we can build these win-win situations on the ground between the private sector and the clients. Can be the farmers, can be others. And here, the expertise, the knowledge, but also when we spoke about data, all what we know, what we have, we can certainly contribute, and I would not say enlighten the debate, but perhaps render the debate as efficient as necessary, also to help then perhaps governments to take the right solutions. Again, no one size fits all solution, but we need to take into account the interrelation we have worldwide. Therefore, yes, we are ready. We would be happy to further discuss this, how to find a way to coordinate. And we are yet part of some of the debates, also phytosanitary measures and others. And I think that's helpful for all of us, but happy to perhaps to regularize this even more. With this, back to you, Dora.
Thank you. Ariana, a challenging question to you from a viewer in Geneva who says your intervention reflected how the World Farmers Organization is keen, of course, on a rules-based trading system and how it relies on that trading system. And yet the viewer is saying often when farmers come to Geneva and come to the WTO, they come to say no to further trade reforms. So he wants to know, where is the balance?
That's a nice one, first, I would love to give you two kind of answers to this question. The first answer that I have to give is that farmers, like any other actor, economic actor, can be scared by change or can be frightened by the risks if they don't see the perspective and the opportunity. And above all, I'm going back to my first intervention today. If the lack of predictability, visibility, transparency of where we are going. And too often we know that agriculture has been used as a bargaining chip on the table of negotiation. That's why many farmers are scared. And we are not coming to the table to see more without any rule. We're coming to the table to say, please, let's shape the rules together so that they are bringing value to all. Because there's one elephant in the room that we must be ready to tackle, which is the rebalancing power in the value chain. We want this to be tackled also within the framework of the international trade negotiations. But if we don't sit at the table, if we are not part of this conversation, for sure, this will never happen. But also, if I may, if you allow me, Doa, to add one comment to this question, also be careful about who's coming to the table, because very often, many people come and claim they represent farmers, even if they are not, or they can be NGOs or civil society or other entities. When we talk about farmers, WFO talks because we do represent farmers organizations and farmers organizations only. So there are also these kind of considerations that need to be put on the table. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this. I have a question that's also to many of you, directed to many of you, and it's a viewer from an important agricultural think tank who is saying, have the multiple ongoing crises, COVID, food, fertilizer, demonstrated that the WTO is unfit for purpose? Yes, there were food security decisions taken at MC12, but were they cobbled together as an emergency response? Question mark. So, Annabelle, perhaps let me start with you.
Well, I think the set of decisions that were taken at MC12 address some of the most pressing issues at the moment. Take, for instance, the decision regarding not imposing bans on imports of the World Food Program that the World Food Program makes for humanitarian purposes. That is precisely an element that is quite relevant in the world today. Or take the decision on sanitary, phytosanitary measures, another very important decision. Or all three decisions, I think, are quite relevant to some of the crises that we face today. Does it mean that nothing more needs to be done? No, we have been discussing very clearly today that rules in the area of agriculture need to be reformed in the WTO to be fit for purpose. But I think that MC12 was a very important first step forward. And I really look forward towards member findings, new creative ways to tackle the different challenges that we confront in the agricultural sector.
Thank you. Ambassador Gemelidine, would you like to comment on the same question? And then Ambassador Pagan.
Just very briefly, we all face a challenge to make the WTO fit for purpose in the new times, with all these important events taking place. And I think we are on the right track. The fact that MC12 took place, the fact that there were outcomes that came out is in itself a positive sign that we need to nurture and to keep encouraging. But just to make sure that while we are doing so, we are aware of the importance of having early results, because we cannot be relegated to establishing work programs that will take 10 years to discuss. We have an urgency, an emergency that we are all globally facing. And therein is the focus that I would like to, that we collectively are able to garner in the coming times, that when there is emergency situations, we are not relegated to the business as usual of talking about how to talk and how to elaborate a work program that will take years to address, while you have a situation that is on the ground, that is burning, and that requires quick solutions. So that is my take, but I think that MC12 represents a very important milestone that is different from preceding ones. And that gives us the hope that in the future, with the energy and a very active and supportive Director General and the goodwill from all the countries, members of the WTO, that we can craft the necessary momentum in the right direction. Thank you.
Thank you. Ambassador Pagan?
Just to add a couple of additional comments to what's been said. Again, yes, we are living moments of crisis. We would like to be able, if we could wave a magic wand and fix everything, that would be great. But, there's a tall order. And again, while we can try to do little bits, like we did with the World Food Program decision, those things that we can get done quickly, we can get done. The work program for LDCs and NFIDCs is another example. But again, we need to rethink and think for the long term, because if we can figure out, and let me add that there were a lot of things that also have been done that are not necessarily related to the agricultural rules, but that have facilitated trade during this moment of crisis that we're living. And we need to also look at those. They're not sexy things, they're not, but trade in certain instances and in certain places has been facilitated. Digitalization of forms, and we need to, and we are looking at how do we maintain those gains that we made in the moment of crisis, keeping them for the future, and or to know that they're there and you can use them in a moment of crisis. The other point I would make is that the WTO is just a collection of the members. The WTO by itself doesn't do anything. It's the collection of the members, and we are a consensus-based organization. So it takes, some effort to get 164 members moving in one direction. But each one of us, and many of us, and I will speak for the U.S. government, we have done a lot during these moments of crisis to help, whether it's with the pandemic. On food security, I believe we're the largest donor on that front in the world. So again, I think that sometimes we're too focused on what has the WTO done, but you can break it down to what have the members of the WTO done, and there is a lot that is happening, and we can't lose sight of that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The last question that I would direct to whoever would like to comment on this panel is a question from a viewer in Germany who is asking about plurilateral solutions in agriculture as a way forward. Given the stalemate in the negotiations, is its breakdown into bite size a possibility and a possible approach? Annabelle, let me start with you.
Well, that's a tough question indeed. So let me maybe answer it in two different levels. So one is that I think the future of the WTO is related to different formats of negotiation. I think that we did very well with multilateral settings in the context of MC12, but there are also ongoing negotiation in other areas that are taking place in a plurilateral format, like in e-commerce or investment and facilitation for development. And even in these areas, for example, are also relevant to agriculture. Now, should discussions in the area of agriculture take place in a plurilateral format? I think no formats for discussion should be closed at the outset. But it is also true that some of the challenges in this area are challenges that, if not of a global nature, they certainly involve a very large number of players. So, it may depend on the topic at hand. It may depend on, particular areas of focus. But to me, it's important to keep all options open, because it's important to make progress.
Ambassador Pagan, would you like to comment?
Sure. It's very well known we're comfortable with plurilateral approaches to various issues. I do think that, as Annabelle has said, whether ultimately a plurilateral agreement is what you need for a particular issue is going to depend on what the issue is. So I don't want to, speak to, the solution to agriculture is going to always be plurilateral, or, because again, it's going to depend on what exactly is it that you're looking at. And I think that sometimes we get very hung up on whether it's a multilateral or plurilateral agreement. But what we need first is just conversations. Again, talking about what is the challenge that we're trying to tackle? What are the possibilities? And those conversations, can happen in any kind of configuration. And that is the way that the many of the solutions come about, is by having small group conversations that then get bigger and bigger as time goes on. Thank you.
Thank you. Ambassador Gemelleddine, would you like to comment on plurilaterals?
Well, my personal preference, being myself a newcomer in the WTO, is for the multilateral route. And I think that we are collectively in a challenge as international community to move forward together. And that's my first preference. And I believe that the more we engage and we listen to all the sides of the story, we can have the building blocks that we work on collectively to the same objective. And more important than this is the silo impact, because all these issues are not only being dealt with in one place, and you see a lot of disconnect between the discussions that are happening in the various areas, fora, and this also complicates matter further. So I know it is challenging to move forward collectively in a multilateral way, but I think this is the preferred route. And while we move in the multilateral way, we bear in mind that there are a multiplicity of fora that discuss issues, and that the separation wall between the various topics is not there anymore. And we are better served when we take into account our respective positions are consistent in these various forums. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have come to the end of our time. I want to thank each and every one of you for having made yourselves available for this closing session of Agri-Food Business Day. I think Annabelle summed up very well in her impressions of the 2 days. She summed up the richness of the conversations that have been had. And of course, to sort of access all of that richness, I would encourage those who haven't viewed the roundtables, the various roundtables, to do so. The entire event will remain on our website, as I mentioned before. Just before closing, I know that Annabelle thanked the International Agri-Food Network. Michael, I wish to thank 2 members of the Secretariat of the Agri-Food Network who are behind the scenes and who have done extraordinary work in making this event happen, Robin Anderson and Rosemary Navarrete. But I also wish to thank somebody on the WTO side who is always behind the scenes in these events and who organizes them entirely by herself, managing the various teams that need to be involved. And that's Celine Schmidt. Thank you, Celine. Thank you. You are behind the scenes, but you are front and center everywhere. So thank you to all of you.
If I may interrupt you. I want to come in to thank you because you have put together a fantastic event with relevant topics, wonderful speakers. I mean, this panel, me excluded, this panel has shown again, how rich were the conversations around this very important topic for the WTO and for farmers around the world and for the world at large. So a big thank you to you for a fantastic job.
Thank you very much. And to our wonderful viewers, do come back to us in 2023. We have a lot of exciting outreach events that are in the pipeline. So stay with us. Thank you very much and goodbye, everyone. Goodbye.